This is TWiT.
So let's introduce our guest, who is a longtime friend of the show. He used to be Gina Trapani's boss.
Well, she was my boss.
Oh, okay.
He's all of our bosses in some sense.
He is boss.
Anil Dash is here. He's recently left his regular job. You started a company called Glitch. I think Gina worked with you at Glitch, right?
Actually, no. She was always an advisor, but we had done a startup together, ThinkUp, and then right after that, I got to work with the team at Glitch, which was a community for building apps that got acquired by Fastly, the infrastructure company. And then after a couple of years there, I just left last month to figure out what I'm doing next.
Isn't that nice, though, to be able to spend time with friends and family? And you have kids?
It is.
And Mario Kart. And the new Mario Kart, as you mentioned in your blog.
That's right. We got a 14-year-old, and this is really the first time I've taken a break since before Gina and I did our company together. So
that's kind of a key time too. 14. It's nice to spend some time.
What are you thinking, Anil? What kind of vision do you have for yourself?
It's genuinely open. I mean, I think, before we sort of, got online here, Jeff, you and I were talking about sort of knowing each other for 25 years. And I think, this is one of those fertile moments that feels like back at the beginning of social media and blogging. And we're at, certainly that kind of inflection point with AI, but it's a little different in that I think in those days, it was very kind of bottoms up, like people were hacking together and building stuff. And this right now feels like people are trying to be sort of top down, like the money guys are trying to tell us this is what it's going to be. And I'm sort of curious to see what the hackers and the makers are building from the bottoms up. So that's really what I'm spending time doing, is like listening to the people who are the coders and the creators and the writers, and what do they say is cool.
Do you think you'll end up in some sort of AI thing?
I don't know, genuinely. I think I look at somebody like one of the people I've always respected is like Simon Willison, who's one of those like brilliant coders who just is every day out there writing code and writing on his blog. And I like, who are the people like that who are, and he's like my age. I'm like, who is the next generation version of that's making something? So just having the time to go out there and read and discover somebody who is new and doesn't have a agenda and is not like connected into the industry, and what are they saying is cool that they're just hacking on for the love of it. Like there's always somebody making stuff because they think it's cool and they think it's interesting, and not because somebody has said this is what we need you to build a business around. Like I just have always loved the people that make that stuff, and I think that's how we all connected many years ago, was just working on whatever was next and interesting. And so it's gotten harder, I think, to find those folks. There used to be much more places where you would just see what was kind of, buzzy organically. And
this is going to sound stupid. That's what I specialize in. But does vibe coding open the door to that? Does it open people can make things they couldn't make before? Is that possible?
Yeah, I don't think that's stupid at all. I mean, I think in some ways, right? I think definitely I'm always in favor of anything that democratizes access, right? Anything that makes it easier, I think is great. And again, not to I'm not one of those good old days people, but I definitely think one of the things about like the early days of blogging is it made it easier to put things online for a lot of people. Like you could write, and now you could write and put it online. And for some people, I think their experience of vibe coding is that thing where it's like it got really hard for a long time to, even if you knew how to code, to do all the other steps to get your code onto a website or onto an app was like really hard. And so like vibe coding can bring that barrier down. But some of what people are saying vibe coding can do ain't necessarily so, right? Like they're sort of over promising of what it can do. So I think I'm a little,
like what?
Trepidatious about some of the promises, but the spirit of, can we make these tools easier enough that somebody who has either fallen out of practice of coding or is not totally fluent in it can get the bar lowered or the gatekeepers out of the way to where they can make something on their own that before would have just been an idea. I think that's awesome. And if somebody feels empowered by that, I'm all over that.
People may not know what a great blogger and writer you are. I've always thought of you, and this is what we need. People like you, Simon Willison, Malik, who are both technical, who are enmeshed in the industry, but also can really communicate and write. And you've always been that way, which in fact makes you one of the thought leaders in this, because so few people can express themselves, let alone have deep thoughts. So one of the reasons I wanted to get you on the show is because you've been writing a lot about AI of late.
Yeah.
What is your sense that, for me, I feel like AI, you should also read his blog for stories about Prince. And hey, good news. He's going to see Wu-Tang tonight for their last performance. So not at the Hammerstein Ballroom, but at Madison Square Garden. So you'll be there with a few Wu-Tang's friends.
For sure.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, it seems to me that AI is one of the most exciting things, even though it's uncertain and the end game is unknown, to happen in technology that I can remember. And I've been covering this for 50 years.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple parts. I think one of the things that's important to understand, talking about 50 years, there is a half century of computer science research and focus on things that we could call machine learning or AI. Right?
I program in Common Lisp. I know all about it.
And I think that's really important for people to understand. Is like, this is not new, and anybody who tries to present it as if this is the beginning of history is probably fine. Right. And I think about like with Glitch, we had an incredible leader and community, engineer leader, Jen Schiffer, who sort of was our sort of voice of the community. And before she had led our community at Glitch, she was a professor teaching computer science and teaching, AI and machine learning. And so that's a career that you could have a decade ago or 2 decades ago. And that's something that is not new. And so I think that's one of those key things is anytime the conventional tech industry or Silicon Valley is sort of trying to get you to forget that there's a decade or 2 decades or 5 decades of history, they're trying to get over on you. Right? I think that's a really key thing. And then the second part is, well, what can we learn from everything prior to LLMs that we can now apply to this domain? I think that's really, really key. And especially because LLMs have obviously incredible applications, incredible things they can do, things we could not do before. They're genuinely new in a lot of ways. And they have a lot of shortcomings. Like every other AI, approach or every other model is not as prone to hallucination, for example, is not as dependent on gathering data without consent.
That's why Stephen Wolfram said, don't give up on symbolic AI.
Exactly. I think there's all these other approaches. And so one of the things we have to ask is, why is there such a focus and an overinvestment in this one approach? Why is this being treated as the be all end all?
But don't you think transformers and LLMs were a phase change? Were a huge...
It is a massive breakthrough.
Yeah.
But I think about, again, I think we're probably a sufficient vintage to recall late 80s, early 90s.
I remember 3 distinct AI winners. That's
yes.
why.
but take an analogy outside of software entirely. We had a inflection point in processing technology from complex instruction set to reduced instruction set.
RISCs.
CISC to RISC, right? Which was the Intel x86 to the kind of ARM style processors. And this was a big debate for folks who weren't around then. There was a big debate, like you would have magazine covers back when magazines were a thing, about was Intel style processors going to win out, or were what came to be called ARM style processors going to win out? And people would debate, and then they're like, well, it's settled. Intel won. Windows and Intel won. This is what people would say around 2000 and the early 2000s. And ain't necessarily so. Right now, here we are 20 years later, and ARM won everywhere, right? The Apple processors won, and everything's got an ARM chip in it. So the battle shifted, but the key thing was there was this argument about what kind of chip architecture would win, and people were ready to throw away an entire approach based on like what they thought was efficient or what would use more. They were like, oh, well, who cares about how much power it uses? Why would that matter? Right? Like, who cares how much electricity a computer uses? Why would that, be relevant to anybody? Not imagining everybody would have a computer in their pocket. And so like the foundations of what is relevant to the market or what's there, like the conventional wisdom can shift very quickly. And I draw that analogy because I think we're sort of at that point where the LLMs are a phase change, and they are a breakthrough, and they are really important. And whenever anybody sort of says throw away the prior 50 years of history, or don't think about a yes and approach where we take more than one together, like that's a thing that makes me skeptical, especially when the experts are sort of asking you to, that Wizard of Oz moment of like, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. If they're saying, don't pay attention to the fact that we indexed all this content without consent and we don't care that the creators are upset, or don't pay any attention to the real environmental impacts of the power that we're using, or that there is this sort of cost. Like, that's a real concern. That's a legitimate concern. That's a valid thing for people to be, upset about or to reckon with. And so like, that doesn't mean that we don't like appreciate what the technology can do. I think the fact that like there should be a complicated answer is key. And that's the thing that I sort of keep coming back to, is like, let's complicate the answer and balance it. And I see very little of that in the industry advocacy. I think the people like you all who are very thoughtful about these things, I think are sort of reckoning with both parts of that. But I think a lot of the vendors who are selling this are sort of, they see any nuance as unacceptable levels of critique. And so that's where the hackers don't see it that way at all. I think hackers are like, I want to know the pluses and minuses of this system so I can balance it against everything else that I'm using. And I would love to give them a menu of options. Like, have a whole palette of options. Like, not just here's 5 different LLMs to choose from, but here's 50 different things, some of which are LLMs and some of which are other things. And how do we compose those all, assemble those all into as many different kinds of Lego blocks as possible?
What other uses of machine learning can be as near in consumer usage in mind?
I think there's a range. I think one of the reasons LLMs I think have captured everybody's imagination is the accessibility of the chatbot model, right? I think people love the sort of feeling of like, I'm typing this thing. But I think for hackers and builders, chat is a really inefficient interface. It's actually a terrible way to program or to build around. And so I think some of the other systems, the more conventional machine learning systems, like if you're going to build a spreadsheet, you can't build a formula around chatting to something, right? You want to say like, what's this? Like, I want to add a number. And if you want the AI to say, like, go get what's the price of this stock today, or what's the weather in this area today? That is a thing that, many AI systems might be able to go retrieve for you in an intelligent way, but you don't want it to have a conversation when it comes back, right? Like, you don't want it to be this sort of long, convoluted response. You want to just give me the number. And I think that's the kind of thing that some of the other approaches might be more inclined to come back with. And especially, you do not want it to hallucinate the answer, right? And so I think some of the other more conventional machine learning tools might be better at that. Also, and actually this is something that Simon Wilson is another one of these great examples. People have even done this with LLMs where they've built test systems where they sort of say, even if you're prone to hallucination, we're going to run a software test against you and make sure the answer that comes back is something that's valid and is something that could plausibly be correct, so that we know it wasn't a hallucination. And I think those things are really key, because there's such like consumers who are not fluent in this stuff are so inclined to trust it, right? I think of it like a really concrete example. My sister is a librarian, public librarian, which I love, and I'm very proud of her.
Wow.
Yeah, they do the most noble work. And, she talks about like the patrons of the library will Google, the hours that the library is open. And it says, oh, you're open until 8 p.m. on Mondays, which they are not. And then they're mad at the librarians saying,
it's their fault.
Why aren't you open until 8? Google said you're open until 8. You're only open until 5 tonight, right? And
but that's not AI. That's just Google.
Right.
Right.
But it shows the authority that Google has to them, right? And that now every librarian in America has to be an expert on SEO.
Right.
And go back and figure out how to change their website so that they can tell Google the right thing to do, right? That's pre-AI, right? You're right. Like, that is the pre-AI SEO. Now, it gets exponentially harder to say, now, how are we going to do 2 problems? One of which is like get the right information into Google, and then 2, get it into all these other systems that might hallucinate the answer, which you're like, well, how can I even possibly guess what it might make up about what it thinks my hours are?
You can't. We know that. That's one of the things that Timmy Gibru and Emily Bender were talking about in Stochastic Paris, was that there's an authority that these assume because they come from a computer, and most people who work with computers don't ascribe that much authority to them, but people who don't are going to give it a lot of weight.
The computer says. And they've had, again, 50 years of from when the first, Star Trek episodes came out. Well, the computer says this, it must be correct. And I don't blame them for that. They were sort of conditioned by culture to say that the computer answer is right. The computer's smarter than me. Like they question themselves.
HAL 9000 going rogue was such a big plot point because it was so unexpected.
Yeah. Right. That's a dramatic twist. And so I think that's a thing where like I have no, sorry, my dog is trying to get on camera. I have no, criticisms for anybody who is, surprised by the fact the computer can be wrong. Right. Like I don't fault them for feeling tricked or especially when Google has been, as far as they know, reliable to them and now is using generative AI without them having changed anything. They didn't change any settings. They didn't push any buttons. They went to the same Google they've always gone to and they typed in a search and it looks a little different, but maybe not recognizably different to them. And all of a sudden it is composing things in a way that they didn't expect. And some PhD they've never met has it doing things a different way. And then the people on the other side, like I said, the librarians who are like, why is it making up our hours now? Are saying like, I don't even know how to fix that. Before I could at least conceivably understand, I could look in the library for a book on SEO and teach myself the way to fix this conceivably. There was at least some theoretical mechanism of fixing it. And now even that is gone. And so
I don't think you're fixable. I mean, you're right, Neil. It's a really, really huge point that we started with a presumption of the accurate computer, and now we're in the age of approximate computing, and that's where we're going to stay.
Yeah.
Whether it's machine learning and prediction machines, or whether it's quantum computing, it all becomes approximate and good enough.
And that's a social contract that has been broken that we haven't had a dialogue about. There's been no consent around it. And this concept of consent I keep coming back to. And it's really been, to be very transparent, this has been one of the reasons why I sort of don't miss being a CEO of tech startups anymore. And why I sort of stepped away from that is a lot of my work and my roles and that stuff, when you're the founder or CEO, the thing you start every day with is the problem that nobody else in the company wanted to reckon with the day before. Right. And a lot of it is like, we need to change our terms of service. If it's not like, we have an HR problem or something, but hopefully it's not. But a lot of it is like, we have to change our terms of service. And every terms of service you've ever clicked, I agree to without reading, all basically says the same thing, which is we can change this unilaterally at any time without telling you. And what you agree to is we're going to continually move the goalposts. And that means there's no consent to anything. And even that we have kind of resigned ourselves to as users, right? But that's users. We know there was at least some quid pro quo. You were giving me a really good search engine in exchange for me getting the goalposts shifted all the time. At least I got good search, right? But now what we've gone even further on is like I have my website that I've been doing for 25 plus years. There's no consent in the other direction of what they're doing to my website, how it's being presented to the world, right? So it used to be that we had that, I'm sure you all have talked about this before, the robots.txt file, which is the permissions of what Google can do to my site. And I gave them permission to crawl my site because I wanted them to, it was, again, a quid pro quo. You bring me visitors and I give you content that people can discover and there's a fair exchange. They changed the terms unilaterally of what it meant they could do. Now they can take content from my site and compose things onto Google that make content on their site. But that wasn't the deal when we started. But I can't appeal that. I can never undo it. And in my case, I have written, created, and researched things on my site that exist nowhere else on the internet. I know this for a fact, right? And I have searched for things on ChatGPT, on Google Gemini, on Claude that I know I'm the only source on, and found it in their indexes.
Is this Prince stuff, or is this
other musical artists? But yes, yeah, exactly, right, and more obscure, right? Because that's sort of it. It's like I know I can go to obscure musical research that I did over the last 20 plus years, where I'm like, I know I was the source, like canonically. And so there is no credible way they can say we found it somewhere else or we synthesized it somewhere else. And so like, I know for a fact that this is showing up in your synthesized results because of me. And I know when you show it on your site and somebody doesn't come to my site, that it is you having taken, and I don't care about the pages. Like I don't have ads on my site. I care about the relationship with that person who cares about that content.
Isn't that the nature of, I mean, look, there's only 5 different stories. And we're all just recasting those 5 different stories over and over again. That's human. It's
media.
It's everything we do is based on what we have absorbed in the past. Well, I mean, I might get ideas from your blogs. I often do, and may not credit you.
Well, I think there's a question of consent. There's also a big difference between the largest companies in the history of the world and somebody I've known for 25 years who's a person that I respect. Right?
Every time I hear that, it really ends up being a complaint about big tech.
Yes and no, right? I mean, I think this part of it. Also, like, there is no such thing as the technology industry. Right. Like tech doesn't mean anything.
Every company is a tech company. In a way.
Nowadays,
right. And also like people talk about like FANG companies still. And I'm like, what the hell does Netscape, I'm dating myself, Netflix have to do?
Mozilla. What is it?
Exactly. That's how old my brain is. Netflix streaming a movie have to do with Apple selling me a laptop, right? Like nothing, right? Like they do some overlap in that they both stream movies. But the point is like the fundamental businesses that these companies are in are not related at all. And the economics of what they do are not related at all. Like where they make their margins is completely unrelated. So like the every company makes tech, to your point, Paris. And I think the other part is like what they care about and where they're trying to like leverage things is very, very different. And so to the
I guess what I'm saying is it's monopolies, though. It's monopoly. It's
monopolies
that are
and
so
market
big that they're dominant, like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple. Those companies are so dominant they don't have to play by the same rules.
But also, we had a premise, and again, I say this as I have started multiple companies. I've raised hundreds of millions of dollars in VC. I've helped companies. I've been on the boards of multi-billion-dollar companies, and we had a premise that companies were supposed to be in competitive markets. We had a premise that markets were supposed to be transparent. We had a premise that there were laws they were meant to be accountable to. We had a premise that public markets had regulators. None of those things are true anymore.
Yeah.
None of those. And I mean this in a very literal way, right? Like and again, like I have been an accountable party for writing public filings for companies, right? Like I have been like on the hook for these things and been in the boardroom for these conversations, and sat across the boardroom table from the officers of these companies. And those used to be material considerations for these companies. And none of those things are true anymore. And so the premise by which there was accountability and responsiveness to these public considerations doesn't exist anymore. And they are acting accordingly. And it's sort of like, the substitute teacher didn't show up for the class. How are the kids acting?
Right. So, I mean, so in a way, that's the problem with AI is not that AI itself is problematic, but that the companies that are making it are not being held accountable for the products they're making.
And some of the people who are in charge of those companies are jerks.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
we've selected for it, right? Like, I mean, I think there are people that were trying to do, various degrees of right? Like, I think there's an interesting thing that happened in terms of like signaling where like when they were still trying to create OpenAI to build ChatGPT years ago, they're like, we'll make it a nonprofit and that'll send a certain kind of signal. And then Anthropic, when they're doing Claude, is like, we'll make it a public benefit corporation that'll send a certain kind of signal. But the structure of incorporation only does so much. You have to want to do the right thing, right? Like you being a nonprofit doesn't mean you're not a grifter. Right. Like I can tell you, like I've been in the nonprofit world a long time, too. And it's like there's a lot of people getting over, and making money.
It might even attract grifters.
Yeah. Because like you have the halo, right. Of looking good.
And they're tax free.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways to get ahead there. And so I think the key thing was like they still at that time wanted to pretend to look good. Now there's the sort of vice signaling that they're all trying to do for each other. And they really like to show that they're the biggest villains. Right. Like that's the way that you sort of show, you're the transgressor. And that means that
does that explain Mecha Hitler and Grok going off the rails?
It's a big part of it. I mean, I definitely think one of the ways of showing that you have power amongst that cohort right now, and a lot of what they're doing is signaling for each other. Right. Like they're constantly, there's preening, like they're sort of peacocking for each other amongst this cohort of like a dozen the biggest like tech tycoons. And again, like I've met most of these guys and unfortunately made a lot of money for a lot of them for a long time.
It's your fault.
And I'm not the most to blame, but
that's what happened in the Gilded Age too, though, right? They were all playing for John Jacob Astor and JP Morgan.
For sure.
It was, yeah.
And they wanted to, they're preening and peacocking for each other. And so some of what they do in that performance now is, if I can be the most transgressive, I'm a bad boy. I mean, it's not any different than like 15-year-olds, right? That are sort of, doing little stunts and tricks for each other. And
if you're not accountable to your customer, you're not accountable to the market, you're not accountable to society, you're still going to want to impress somebody, and it's going to be your other fellow billionaires.
Right, because after
oligarchs.
The first billion, it doesn't mean anything, right? Like there's no difference in quality of life between $10 billion and $50 billion. Right. You're not like more planes. There isn't, you don't eat more in a day of your like, gold-plated caviar or whatever you're eating.
You just have a bigger TV in your bedroom, basically.
There isn't a bigger, like there's no more screen you can see. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and I mean this in a very literal way. Like there's a few of these guys that I had still kept in touch with until they got their first billion. And, their kids would be about the same age. And the funny thing is, like, their kids don't get access to some super secret Legos that my kid doesn't have. Do you know what I mean? Like it's the same Legos, and their kids are not happier. Yeah. And I would see like none of them.
They get better shrinks. The other kids.
They need them.
Yeah,
because,
exactly.
And I don't mean this lightly. 0% of the guys I knew that became billionaires out of the cohort I was in, 0% of them are still with the spouse they had then. Yeah. Not one.
Well, you traded in one. You trade your spouse
not
in
one.
For your trophy wife. Yeah.
And what they tell themselves is, no, well, we grew apart because life got complicated and But like, you're like, now, what's my real answer? Like, would I give my wife up for $1 billion? Clearly, my answer is no. And clearly their answer is yes. Right. And they would never say it. Would they give their kids up, seeing their kids every day for $1 billion? And their answer demonstrably is yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And it's proof, right? It's proof. And like, obviously people have, complicated relationships and people split up for all kinds of good reasons. And like, there's life that happens, but it cannot statistically be the case that none of them could make it work.
Some of them have several wives.
Sure, exactly. Right. But that's the thing is like, you don't become a billionaire by accident. You have to have wanted it more than you wanted anything else in your life.
Yeah, that's
right.
And
what does that design for in your head is not sustaining relationships, not sustaining connection to the rest of the world.
You think they started with that, or the temptation overtook them?
I think that's sort of, so here's the thing. I think people could want to certainly like, I want to be successful and I want to make enough money to be comfortable. And then you start to select out, right? Like I know people that made merely $100 million who still live on Earth.
Pish
and exist. You know what I mean? And they're like, they go grocery shopping and they like act like people and they like, I can have dinner with them and they sound like a human. And I'm like, okay, great. Good for you. I'm happy for you. And like, they're still like recognizably normal. And like, that's still all the money in the world. I'm like, you have literally anything you could ever want. Right. And they're like, yeah, I'm good. And so like, it's interesting what that inflection point is. But if you were at that point and then you're like, no, I need to have 50 times this much. You're like, your brain's already broken.
That? Yeah.
What do you think is the difference between those people? What do you think separates the people who get the 100 million and are like, I'm going to retain some form of normalcy and be grounded to earth versus the people whose brain are fundamentally broken?
I wish I knew. I think there's a couple. I mean, I think it's like anything else. It's like your parents. You know what I mean? I think it's like how you were raised. It's who you're around. How isolated are you? What's your own neuroses and insecurities? Like it's just human stuff. Like we're all broken in our own way and whatever it is. And if somebody pushes your buttons the right way, but like I said, nobody becomes that wealthy by accident. The challenge now is like, I saw this where being a CEO of a venture-backed company, it almost selects for being psychotic. Right. Because the VCs and these things, they're like, here's what we want you to do and what you have to forego. And like a really concrete example is like, I really cared about providing good health insurance for my team. And, it's like prosaic stuff. Okay, we want Aetna or whatever, Cigna, and here's what we want to do. And we want to have this coverage for these things. And the reality is, when I screw up as a CEO, people lose their jobs. And when they lose their jobs, they lose their health insurance in America, right? Which is immoral. It's immoral that I get to choose whether people can get treated for cancer or have kids, right? And so if you're a person with a conscience, you feel like crap all the time, right? And
power.
Yeah, like
or you're a sociopath,
when you feel like crap,
and
when you feel like crap, you have to also decide, do I want to continue to feel like crap and retain a conscience?
Right,
or do I want to turn inward and be like, actually, no, there's some other explanation.
Exactly,
and there's a reason why I shouldn't feel like crap.
And so there's an entire machinery built around, no, you shouldn't feel like crap. You are a brave and bold decision maker who has done the noble thing, and you are a truth teller. Right. And they are wrong for letting you down, and they caused you to have to do layoffs.
Right.
And it's their fault, and they don't deserve healthcare, and they're uppity, and you should punish them. Right. There's an entire machinery saying that in your ear. And do you choose to listen to that, or do you choose to hold on to your conscience is the fundamental reckoning we're in as a society, really. And then now who makes it through that filter is the people that are getting to have enough money to train an AI right now. Right, because it's really, really expensive to train an AI.
Yeah.
Right, and I hate and I'm not trying to be preachy. I'm just like, literally, I've been through this because I'm like, part of why I want there to be less expensive AI models is so that we can have like just a thin layer of people who are not complete psychopaths can afford to build AIs too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the models leapfrog each other and end up all doing kind of the same thing. I think the interesting thing is going to be at the application layer.
Yes, yeah. There's so many cool things to be built.
But now you see Meta, rumors are that Meta is not going to do open source Llama anymore.
Yeah.
And because
they hate people using it to train.
That's killing at a university because that's what we use now.
Yep.
Well, what's really terrifying is the notion that if we do, and it's a big if, get some sort of super intelligence, is that they will be controlled by people you just described, like the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Elon Musks of the world. And I mean, that's the real hazard. It's not the AIs that are the hazard. It's the people who are making them.
I mean, software has values baked into it, right? And we're all flawed. So it's always going to have bugs in that way, separate from the bugs in the software.
Right.
And the question is like, what are the values of the people that made the apps? And, that part of it is a big reckoning. And I don't fault like a normal consumer not understanding that is normal. Like you wouldn't think about that when you're like buying a phone. But I think those of us who are like into this stuff think about that a lot. And it's sort of fallen out of favor. We used to care about that stuff a lot, 10, 20, 30 years ago, where we really, it's funny because like we used to think like, Microsoft was the evil empire, right? And it's like, man, take me back to Windows 95, right? Like that's like, if that's as bad as it got, that would have been great. But I think now like the stakes are so much higher and people are so much busier that like thinking about like, I have to like download an app and then know about the weird philosophy of the dude who built it. Man, I don't got time for that. And also it's a nightmare. Like these weird, esoteric things that they're focused on. Like I don't want normal people to have to think about that. I don't want non-tech nerds to have to think about that. But how do you distill that into something people can understand that's consumable? Like I think a very, recently, Aaron Swartz has been on my mind a lot, and he was a friend and really great at communicating a lot of these concepts so effectively. And in so many disciplines, right? So whether it was intellectual property or just like privacy or so many of these sort of concepts. And I think it's interesting because there's sort of been this mythology that's developed around him, since he passed. But I think he was really a pragmatist in so many ways. And so I think about like, who is a new young version of that? And part of it was he was born into a context where there was a community around him that cared about these things. And so he could rise to be a leader and a voice because a lot of people cared about these things. And if you are a teenager like he was when he started to do this work right now, where would you find a cohort of other people who care about this? I think it would be very hard. If you're like, I think I care about privacy and personal expression and all those other things. Like I'm on the board of the EFF. This is the things they fight for. And it's like, some of us here have some gray beards, right? There's way too many gray beards. It's a lot of dad energy, and it's like, we need a lot of like young people of like, different genders and different ages and different races coming in representing this thing because it's so relevant to new folks, but they don't know it. And I'm like, shame on me. Like, they can't find it anymore. Because what book would you read? They're not like finding some old middle-aged dad's blog, So like, that's what I'm trying to do is like figure out where's the place that's discoverable culturally for people who care about these things, but don't necessarily want to nerd out, to say, I want to have good tech,
teach,
and
Neil,
find good
teach.
apps.
What about
teach and
teaching?
create it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it has to be like, maybe, but I feel like I've been thinking a lot about like Dua Lipa's podcast is amazing, right? And she does a great job interviewing authors, just super, super culturally fluent. Obviously, her music's amazing. Her shows are great, but she's just super great at articulating really good cultural ideas. And she fought for controlling her master recordings and owning them. Right? Taylor Swift has obviously done an amazing job with Taylor's versions. They are incredible educators about intellectual property. Mm-hmm. They just don't know it. And so like, they're teachers. They are teaching, like, they are heirs to Aaron Swartz's work. They don't know it. And like, they're living in a world that Aaron Swartz defined. And so like, that part of like, how do we get them to see that they have articulated a position that is the solution to people being worried about is AI taking content without consent, right? Because lots of people can say, well, AI engines are stealing content. But the answer is artists have to own their work. And nobody has done more to advance the cultural conversation about artists owning their work than Taylor Swift saying Taylor's versions. Right. So we have an entire generation that's growing up knowing that. That is the other part of the conversation about, is AI working with consent?
But let me poke at that, Neil.
Please.
Hold on.
Because
we're long and I need to.
Oh, sure.
So I'm going to give you a choice, Neil. We can wrap this up because we only asked for a half an hour of your time.
You got a concert to go to.
Sure.
40 minutes and Wu-Tang awaits. In which case we could wrap it up now, or we could take a break and come back. It's up to you. I don't want to overburden you.
I'm happy to go another 5-10 minutes if it's useful. I don't know if you want to put a button on it.
Jeff, can you hold your question?
Yeah, I can hold it. I can hold it.
Okay, we'll do a quick ad, and because I also want to thank you for your wonderful blog post. Wherever you get your podcast is a radical statement.
Oh, yeah.
Because as a podcaster, I'm a firm believer in that. And the Aaron Swartz's RSS is what powers what we do. And it's a radical technology that has survived.
It really has.
Yeah. And I'm very glad for that. Actually, there is a cartoon that came out last week about RSS. And one of the things it says is that you may not know it, but you're using it every time you listen to a podcast.
Yeah.
Love that. Anil Dash is our guest. Somebody said in the Discord chat, one of our club members said, what distinguishes Anil is not about his ability to express, but rather he's effective at bringing a moral voice with a deep technical background.
Always thus.
And without preaching and assuming everyone he disagrees with is evil. So I agree.
I appreciate that. I mean, I aspire to that. I hope I'm doing justice to it.
I think you are. Anil Dash is our guest on Intelligent Machines. 5 more minutes with him before he's got to go see the Klan.
The Wu-Tang Clan. Let's be specific.
That's a good point.
To be specific.
That's a very good point.
Very important distinction here.
Parentheses Wu-Tang.
Yes.
Before he sees the Tang. What do they call him? The Wu?
The Wu-Tang Clan.
The Wu is fine. Wu is fine for
WTC.
short. Wu-Tang is good.
Yeah, Wu-Tang. He's going to see The Last. They don't do a lot of concerts.
No, they've been out. I mean, the guys do shows solo a lot, but they haven't been together a lot. I mean, it's the band was.
Were you mad when Martin Shkreli bought the album?
Not even the top 10 list of things to be mad at that guy for, but sure.
It's one of them. He used his ill-gotten gains to do it.
Yeah. I mean, nothing could be more characteristic of the music industry than that guy owning
right
one
there.
of their records.
Yeah. In a nutshell. Yeah. Our guest, Anil Dash, is on the beach, we used to say, when you're in radio and you're not working, you're on the beach. He is calling from a very hot New York City right now. I appreciate that. You're all in the hot Eastern Seaboard.
Yeah. It's like 90 degrees today.
Yikes. That's hot in New York. That's sweaty. That's terrible. Yeah.
And the dew point is like 80 or like 70 something.
Wasn't it nice when you were out here, Paris, enjoying the nice climate?
Perfect. And it was perfect in Northern California.
Yep. So you put a button in it. You can now unbutton your thought, Mr. Jarvis.
So Aaron Swartz stood for, and tragically died for, opening up information to society. And forgetting, if we can for just a second, the evil people and evil companies that may be in charge of many of the models now, if we're going to end up using large language models, and they're trained only on the free crap that's on the internet, we're all the worse for
Not all crap.
I had an example the other day where I was doing some research and I thought, wow, this is actually pretty good. And look at all these sources and the deep research, and the sources were all crap because that's what's available. And I struggle with a question of whether, as journalists, whether there is a moral obligation to share even with the models, so the models will in turn be better to share with the public and with the children who are going to use it for teaching and such. So how do we balance what Aaron stood for and these choices with those who control this information, like academic publishers still and news publishers today?
I think the question is about ownership and control of the models, right? So like if we need to have good models and there's a public good in creating them, then we should have models that are owned and controlled in the public good, right? Like where are the models that are owned and run by universities, that are owned and run
in Norway? They've done that in Norway. They've done that elsewhere. Yep.
By governments, I think that we should have them run by unions, right? Like, I don't think there's any reason why, like, one of the things I was thinking about was Ryan Johnson and Natasha Lyonne and a couple other filmmakers had made a Gen AI tool for filmmakers that was trained on consensually gathered video data. But they've gotten a lot of blowback because people didn't really understand that you could have consensual data. So they're like, oh, why are they making this AI slop tool, right? And they just didn't have a vocabulary to explain it, because like people love Natasha Lyonne, right? So they're like, why are they yelling at her on the internet? And so I was realizing, like, if even people that are that sort of culturally popular can't articulate that there could be, sort of quote unquote good AI, well, then maybe the Screen Actors Guild and the WGA should own their own model and sort of be in control of something where they have leverage, and then rather than the studios being the ones that control it. And this sort of goes back to, like, at the turn of the century, there was this battle between Napster and the labels, but the artists weren't in the conversation at all. So you ended up with this thing that the labels made money and the streaming platforms made money, but the artists got screwed. And we're sort of on that path again, where like everybody but the artists and creators is in the room. And so I think about, there are other models that are possible, and people just don't talk about co-ops. They don't talk about universities. They don't talk about public sector. But also, like, it's the internet. We used to talk about people like organizing together on the internet. Like, it's an old-fashioned idea, but like, there's no reason that you couldn't just sort of say, like, people are going to work together to build models collectively. We used to think that's what the internet was for. It is what it was designed for. Mm-hmm. Like, the fundamental purpose of the internet was to collectively share and publish information academically, right? The web was born to do that. And so I think it's not a radical idea. It's actually a very old-fashioned idea. And there's no reason technically it couldn't be done. So I think we just have to, like, reopen people's imagination to it. But again, I don't fault anybody who is from this century not knowing that, because we have done a very poor job of teaching them about it, right? If you are of this century, other than me being from the 20th century, how would you know? Like, shame on me. I haven't told anybody about it. Like I said, the early career people I talk to that are trying to mentor in the tech industry, I'm like, oh, well, how did you learn about this stuff? Like, well, I read everything. I read Peter Thiel's book, and I read Mark Andreessen's manifesto, and I read Hacker News, right? And then, and I mean, I feel that way. And then I'm like, oh, well, yeah, shame on me. Like, what would they read in the startup world, right? And Jeff, they will have read maybe some of your stuff, but like, that's not a like startup guy, right? That's some academic. Like, we're dismissed. Like, even me, like, I can shape myself, like form myself into a thing that looks like a startup guy to them. But they're like, but that's not real. Like that guy writes too, so he's not a real founder guy.
He's an intellectual. Forget him.
Right. No, for real, because they've been told if somebody has been in a journalistic context, you should dismiss them. If somebody has been in an academic context, you should dismiss them. They have been told this explicitly.
Right.
They are the enemy. Right. Back when Clubhouse was a thing in early COVID, like you would have Mark Andreessen in a Clubhouse room called How to Destroy the New York Times.
Yeah.
Because that's the enemy. And so when you're a startup guy who like that's what you saw when you were in college, anybody who is affiliated with that whole world is suspect.
We got a problem. I have to say, though, there is a certain NIMBY point of view as well among artists that I mean, we've got to find a path that is equitable for everybody. And let's face it, Anthony Nielsen was saying this. Disney's not suing Stable Diffusion to protect the artist.
No. And like the labels weren't suing Napster because they're like, we just love our musicians so much.
Right? We just want them to get paid more.
Yeah. We just want to look it out for the little guy. Yeah. I mean, I think that's sort of it is like, it's always been at the expense of the real creators and it's always been at the expense of the real artists.
But we still create because that's a human.
Because you can't not create.
That's what humans do.
Yes.
And that's the good news. That's the optimistic point of view, I think.
You can't stop the creators, right? Because it's in your blood. It's in your DNA. Like you all have been inspirations to me for decades now because you've never stopped, Leo, Jeff, like you guys
never stop.
You can't stop. Like you guys have never stopped, podcasting. You never stopped writing. You've never stopped putting stuff out there. You never could. Right. And it's always been that, that sort of, like I said, it's inspiring to me. I don't get to say it often enough, but like, you guys being out there and having that voice, being consistent, having your values, giving a platform to people. You guys have put so many people on over the years who wouldn't have had a voice, wouldn't have had that platform, including myself over the years. Like that's profound. There are not many people doing that anymore. There are not many people who were doing it 20 years ago. And, that is something where, and you built your own platforms.
Yeah.
Right. And so
I would venture
how do we teach new people to do that?
We don't do it for the money. Right.
You make money to be able to make things. You don't make things to make money.
Exactly.
And that's profound, right? That's important. And there are people who still have that, but they don't have the way to articulate that. And they haven't seen enough role models to teach them that they could do that too.
Well, you're a great role model for me too, Neil. And I
appreciate that.
We've been trying to get you on for a while. I'm really glad we could get you on. I'm glad you're getting some free time and spending some time with the kids and the Wu-Tang Clan.
Glad to.
They haven't replaced Prince in your imagination.
No. And here's one thing I'll say for folks who don't know. I have been a big fan of Prince and a scholar of his work for a long time. For folks who get a chance, if you don't know his work, look it up because he was a great musician, great artist, made great songs. And he was somebody who fought for artists to own their work.
That's right.
He made all his recordings and his music, wrote all his stuff himself. And he wanted people to be able to create their own work and put it out there on the internet themselves. So it's something to learn from.
Who can forget when he had slave written on his chest, right? I mean, that's why he changed his name.
He said the thing he wanted to be remembered for more than anything is if you don't own your masters, then your masters own you. Talking about his masters.
Oh, I love it. Wow. There is a vault there somewhere in Minneapolis with a lot of Prince music. Do you have any idea of how we're ever going to get to hear that?
Yeah. I've done a bit of work with his estate, and they've had a lot of. It's complicated to manage that stuff, but they put out a good number of recordings, since his passing, and they've done a number of deluxe recordings. And the funny thing is, some of these albums they put out, they do like here's the outtakes and the additional songs and things that get out there. Some of the individual albums they put out have an additional 5 albums of material along with it. Like some of the bonus material things are bigger than entire artists' catalogs that come with it. So we've been just spoiled for the work. This entire film. Like one of my favorite albums of his is called "Sign of the Times." It came out in 1987.
Yeah.
The concert film that comes with it. This is just one of those things where like just on the side, live performance in his studio with Miles Davis.
Oh my God.
That's the kind of stuff that's just lying in the vault. So, just unbelievable stuff. So if folks who don't know his work haven't had the chance, you can, no matter what genre you're into or what era of music you like, there'll be something in there for you.
Yeah. He was an amazing talent. Amazing. Thank you, Anil Dash. AnilDash.com is his blog. You got to go there, read his stuff, stay in touch with him. He's on Mastodon. He's on Blue Sky.
all the things.
He's on Threads as well. Really appreciate it, Anil. It's really
appreciate you having me.
To talk to you again. Yeah, I miss you. It's so good to have you back. We'll get you back soon if we can.
Absolutely.
All right.
Appreciate you. Thanks.
Take care. Thank you. Hey, it's Leo Laporte. I hope you've enjoyed this little clip from our programming at TWiT.tv. For more, visit our website, TWiT.tv, or subscribe in your favorite podcast client. There's also a link somewhere down there.
I'm not a human being, not into this